Yo, what's good everyone? We're all getting a free copy of Candace in 5.1, so is she good now? It's been nearly 2 years since she was released. She was underwhelming on launch, but there's been so many additions to the game in terms of characters, artifacts and more that she's finally strong now, and in my opinion even meta in some situations. Let's break down a timeline of how she's improved, and along the way we'll see a bunch of different ways that we can use her, including with a new limited 5-star Shalonen. Starting with her release, she came out in 3.1 on Cyno's banner and did two things. She converted the normal attacks of Sword, Claymore and Polearm users into Hydro, and she buffed normal attacks when they dealt elemental damage. Unfortunately, she was mid on release. There was no real scenario where you'd use her over Xingqiu or Yelan. As we know from the Natlan cast, Hoyoverse prefer white chocolate. Instead, you'd use this Caramel Queen and Abyss cycles as an alternative, where the other two were already occupied. For example, if you had Xingqiu and Yelan on one side, you could use Candace on the other side to convert Cookie's normals into Hydro. While it wouldn't be as good as the Xingqiu Hyperbloom variants, it'd be viable enough to get you 36 stars. The 3.2 release of Nahida meant that Cookie as the on-fielder would receive the Elemental Mastery from Nahida's burst, which benefited Cookie's Hyperblooms. I guess we can consider this a first good team even if there are better alternatives. She also had charge attack vape teams, but Elemental Infusions and Viridescent Venera could make them awkward. Nalu also dropped in 3.2, enabling some Candace Bloom teams, but her best variant came in 3.4 with the release of Yao Yao. This is where Candace first got a team where she wasn't just a nice alternative. Yao Yao has decent AoE coverage with her rabbits, the little radish shitter. Her biggest downside is needing to be on field for so long, but with Candace converting her normals to Hydro, that weakness is covered. Here you could argue Candace was on a similar level to Xingqiu. Who'd have thought that the guardian of an entire village would need a little girl with massive bells on her head to finally have some use in combat? Fast forward to Fontaine, and 4.2 in particular, where we finally got Farina. One of my favourite things about Farina is that she made mono hydro meta. It was already strong, but having another off-field damage dealer as well as a buffer meant that it could compete with other teams that have reactions. Just like the Cookie team we looked at, I don't think the Candace variation of mono hydro is the best, but there are reasons as to why it's useful. She gets 4 buffs here. HP from the Hydro Resonance, Yelan's passive increases her overall damage, Farina's Fanfare buff does the same, and Candace's own burst will increase her normal attack damage. You'd get even more buffs if you went with Jean as your healer. Viridescent Venera gives you some shred, and a C2 if you have it means quicker attack speed, and with it more procs of Yelan's burst. Having Candace's skill on a 6-second cooldown means you can use it fairly regularly. This gives the team more particles, which could mean less energy recharge on them and more damage orientated substats like crit rate and damage. Farina likes cake and Candace is a snack herself, so it's a perfect match. Technically, this next one was a 4.0 buff, but it was only the release of Farina in 4.2 that made it viable. Marashosei Hunter was a buff for Candace in this same team. Extra normal attack damage from the 2-piece and extra crit rate from the 4-piece makes it a lot easier to deal damage with Candace. It makes her a more viable driver in this team too over someone like Yelan, who instead is holding 4-piece emblem. The next big buff, and arguably the biggest in the entire list, was Xian Yun, who dropped in 4.4. With Farina and Yelan in the other slots, it meant that Candace finally had a team where she was a solid DPS rather than a copium one, or an enabler for other units to drive reaction-based teams. You get the same buffs from Yelan and Farina that you got in the last team, but this time you also have the plunging buff from Xian Yun. Until we get a Hydro Claymore that can self-infuse their normals, Candace is going to be the best Hydro unit to have on field in this team. The weakest link in this team is Yelan. She offers energy, her buff and some off-field damage when you use a normal attack after plunging, but that isn't a whole lot. Put this thought aside for a minute because we're going to revisit this team later. 4.6 gave us Arlecchino, who provided Candace with a genuinely meta-competitive team. Candace's C6 applies Hydro in an AoE regularly enough that you could vape Arlecchino's hits against multiple enemies. Against the 3 Kenkis for example. With single target Hydro units like Yelan, Farina or Xingqiu, you can vape against single target content, but AoE can be an issue, so Candace has value there. You do need a C6 for that role though. Arlecchino's normal attacks would be buffed by Candace's base kit as well. I don't imagine most of you built any elemental mastery on your Arlecchino, so consider giving Candace 4-piece instructor so you can give some elemental mastery to Arlecchino this way instead. Emily was released in 4.8, and even though people were disappointed in her design, you know, with her not being lilac and instead looking like Elton John with tits, she does provide Candace with another team. You might remember I briefly mentioned people used to run Candace as a charge attack DPS in vape teams. The issue is shredding the right element with Viridescent Venera, as well as balancing bonus in the elemental application. Emily throws all that nonsense in the bin, makes burning viable with a big off-field damage, and there's enough Dendro and Pyro that you can easily vape Candace's charge attacks. The biggest issue for this team is energy regeneration. I found out the hard way that it's best to just give Xiangling Favonia's Lance and try to build a little energy recharge on Candace too. Somewhere around 160 in this team will work. The first 5-star from Natlan was Mualani, who gave Candace another teammate. Look at all these teams for her now, greedy guts. Save some for everyone else. Mualani's Shark Bite counts as a normal attack, which means you can make use of Candace's ability to buff elemental damage from normal attacks. And it doesn't even require you to take any of her talents past level 1. The new Cinder City artifact set means she can give the team elemental damage too, which is another buff for her. She also gives Mualani some HP from the Hydro Resonance, which is appreciated. Okay, so remember how I said that Yolan could be considered a weak link in that plunge team and that we'd revisit the team later? Now's that time because Shalonen releases in a week and she's going to be filling that flex slot. She gives 36% resistance shred and 40% hydro damage from the Cinder City 4-piece. These don't only benefit Candace but Farina too. I found the original plunge team comfy enough with Xian Yun's healing, but having another healer there is a welcome extra layer of protection should we ever get an abyss with corrosion or the constipated beasts. Shalonen's also a buff in the mono hydro team where Candace was the driver. Instead of going Candace, Yolan, Farina and Kokomi, you go Candace, Yolan, Farina, Shalonen. Is less fanfare stacks for Farina, but it's an overall damage increase for the team anyway. Okay, so we've looked at how she's been buffed since the release, and along the way we've looked at her teams. Now let's look at how you should build her. In terms of weapons for her on-field playstyle, including the plunge teams, the mono hydro driver team and the charge attack team with Emily, you'll want something with crit. Most of the passives don't have great synergy with the exception of Staff of the Scarlet Sands. It gives you some of her elemental mastery back as attack, which works well in the Emily team, as well as 44.1% crit rate, which makes it a solid stat stick for any of her on-field teams. Jade Spear's a bit more universal for a little crit rate and big attack buffs. Staff of Homer gives crit damage if you're struggling for it, as well as HP to benefit a passive, and gives some of that HP back as attack. I haven't mentioned it yet, so I guess I should talk about the HP passive here. Her burst, as we know, gives 20% elemental damage bonus when characters deal elemental damage with their normal attacks. Candace's passive makes it so that they get an extra 0.5% for every 1000 HP Candace has. It's useful to build around this in support builds, but for DPS builds you'd prefer attack. It's nice that Homer gives a bit of both though, cause she'll benefit from both. Deathmatch is a nice stat stick for anyone who doesn't have any 5-star polearms. White Tassel gives 23.4% crit rate and 48% normal attack damage, but the low base attack is an issue. You can get around this issue though by playing her with Bennett, especially with him holding the Bless, and more so if you also get an attack from the Pyro Resonance like you would be in the Emily team. Ballad of the Fjords gives crit rate and elemental mastery for this team too. For her support weapons, surprise surprise, Favonia's Lance is the best to give herself and the team energy particles. Engulfing Lightning's great for her energy recharge too, but I'd only use it if you have one lying around. Don't pull one for her. Black Tassel gives more HP for that passive I just talked about. Catane Crossbow is nice for Bloom teams too. It generates energy for her, but also gives her some elemental mastery for the instances of hydro application in a kit. For artifacts, you'll be relieved to hear that all of her options are available in the Strongbox. For DPS teams with Farina, I recommend Marishose Hunter for 15% normal attack damage and 36% crit rate. Alternatives, or sets that you'd run without Farina, are Nim Stream for up to 30% hydro damage and 25% attack, Heart of Depth for 30% normal attack damage and 15% hydro damage, and Gladiator for 18% attack and 35% normal attack damage. You'll want to go attack or energy recharge sands, hydro damage goblet, and a crit circlet. In terms of energy recharge requirements, it depends on who you're running her with, what elements they are, and whether or not they are Favonia's weapons. I would say, if possible, get at least one Favonia's weapon in the team and stick at least 160% energy recharge on Candace. Because of the 565 base attack, Favonia's Lance itself isn't a bad option on Candace, even as a DPS if you're struggling for energy in a build. For a support build, just stack HP and energy recharge, crit rate circlet if you're holding Fav, and give her elemental mastery for Bloom teams. I dropped a Shalonen guide last week discussing teams and builds for her, another video discussing 10 units buffed by her, and I'm gonna be dropping one where I talk about a weapon banner and why losing the 50-50 to Chiori's weapon might not be as bad as it sounds. If you're interested in them, subscribe to the channel and take it easy.